March 1993, Seattle. The house on Lake Washington Boulevard was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday night. Kurt Cobain pulled into the driveway at 11:47 p.m., earlier than expected from the studio session. The porch light was off, unusual for Courtney. He'd been working late on rough demos, trying to capture something that had been haunting him for weeks. A melody that felt important but incomplete. The kind of musical fragment that demanded attention but refused to reveal its full shape. Kurt grabbed his guitar case from the passenger seat and walked toward the front door. The house felt different, wrong somehow. Not the comfortable chaos he'd grown used to, but something else, something careful. He opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake Frances Bean if she was sleeping. The living room was dark except for the glow from the kitchen. He could hear voices, Courtney's laugh, then another voice. Male, unfamiliar. Kurt stood in the hallway, guitar case in hand, processing what he was hearing. The conversation was intimate, too close, too familiar. The kind of talk that happens between people who share secrets. He moved toward the kitchen, his footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. Through the doorway he could see them. Courtney sitting on the counter, her legs wrapped around someone Kurt didn't recognize. A man with dark hair, expensive clothes, the kind of person who belonged in music industry circles, but wasn't a musician himself. They were kissing. Kurt didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched his wife with another man in their kitchen, in the house where their daughter slept upstairs. The scene felt surreal, like something happening to someone else, in some other life. The man's hands were in Courtney's hair. She was making small sounds of pleasure that Kurt recognized, sounds that had once been reserved for him. The intimacy of the moment was obvious, practiced. This wasn't the first time. Kurt took a step backward, then another. Neither of them had noticed him. He retreated to the living room, then to the front door, then outside. He sat on the porch steps, guitar case beside him, staring at nothing. 20 minutes passed, maybe 30. Kurt lost track. He heard a car start in the back alley, then drive away. The kitchen light went off. Footsteps on the stairs. Courtney going to bed. Kurt waited another 10 minutes, then went inside. The house had returned to its normal chaos. Dishes in the sink, magazines scattered on the coffee table, Frances Bean's toys in the corner. Everything exactly as it had been when he left that morning. Except everything was different. Courtney was already in bed, pretending to sleep. Kurt could tell by her breathing that she was awake, but he didn't say anything. He went to the bathroom, brushed his teeth, came back to the bedroom. Courtney didn't move. Kurt lay down on his side of the bed, still fully clothed. He stared at the ceiling for an hour, maybe two. Courtney's breathing eventually shifted into genuine sleep. Around 3 a.m., Kurt got up quietly and went downstairs. He opened his guitar case in the living room and sat on the couch with his acoustic guitar. A beaten-up Martin that had been with him since before Nirvana, before fame, before Courtney, the guitar that knew all his secrets. Kurt started playing softly, just finger-picking, letting his fingers find patterns in the dark. No specific song, just movement. Music as meditation, as processing, as the only language that made sense when words failed. The melody that had been haunting him for weeks suddenly became clear. Not happy, not sad, just honest. The chords fell into place like pieces of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve, without knowing what the picture was supposed to look like. Then the words came. It's so relieving to know that you're leaving as soon as you get paid. Kurt sang quietly, barely above a whisper, not wanting to wake anyone. The lyrics came fully formed, like they'd been waiting inside him, complete and ready. It's so relaxing to know that you're asking wherever you get your way. He played the progression again, adjusting the timing, finding the rhythm that felt right. The song wasn't angry, it wasn't vengeful, it was something else, something more complicated. It was the sound of acceptance mixed with grief. It's so soothing to know that you'll sue me. This is starting to sound the same. The chorus emerged naturally, inevitably. I miss the comfort in being sad. I miss the comfort in being sad. I miss the comfort in being sad. Kurt played the song through completely, then again, then a third time. Each repetition revealed new layers, new possibilities. This wasn't just about Courtney. It was about the pattern of his relationships, the way he'd learned to find identity in disappointment, comfort in emotional chaos. He realized he'd been writing his autobiography without meaning to. By 4 a.m., the song was complete. Kurt had found something he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. The musical fragment that had been haunting him wasn't incomplete after all. It had been waiting for this moment, this revelation, this particular kind of heartbreak to give it meaning. He played it one more time, quietly, in the dark living room of the house where his wife slept upstairs after cheating on him with a stranger. The song felt like closure and beginning simultaneously. Kurt put the guitar back in its case and went upstairs. Courtney was still asleep, or still pretending to be. He changed into pajamas and got into bed. This time he fell asleep quickly. The next morning, Courtney acted normal. She made coffee, played with Francis Bean, talked about her day. She didn't ask about Kurt's late return or where he'd been when the kitchen light was on. She didn't mention hearing him play guitar at 4 a.m. Kurt watched her performance with detached curiosity. She was good at this, at pretending nothing had changed. But something had shifted in Kurt's perception. He could see her more clearly now, see the performance itself rather than getting lost in it. After breakfast, Kurt went to his home studio and played the song again, this time recording a rough demo. He called it, "You Know You're Right." The title came to him while he was setting up the recording equipment, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The demo was raw, unpolished, just Kurt and his acoustic guitar in a small room. But it captured something essential, something true. When he listened back to the recording, Kurt heard his own voice differently. Not the voice of Nirvana's frontman, but the voice of a man processing the end of his marriage in real time. That afternoon, Courtney found him in the studio. "What are you working on?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "New song," Kurt said, not looking up from his guitar. "Can I hear it?" Kurt glanced at her, then back at the guitar. Something in his expression must have warned her, because she became more careful. "It's not finished yet," he said. But it was finished, and somehow, Courtney knew it. "Kurt," she said, "we should talk." "About what?" The question hung in the air between them. Kurt continued finger-picking, the melody of "You Know You're Right" emerging from the strings like confession. Courtney stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to the music. Her expression changed as she recognized something in the song, some quality that felt familiar and threatening at the same time. "I heard you playing last night," she said quietly. "Around 4. "Did you? That song, it's—" She paused, searching for words. "It's different from your usual stuff." Kurt looked at her directly for the first time since she'd entered the room. His eyes were clear, calm, almost kind, but there was distance there that hadn't been there before. "Yeah," he said. "It is different." Courtney took a step into the room, then stopped. Something about Kurt's manner told her not to come closer. "Kurt, You don't need to explain anything," he said, interrupting her gently. "The song explains everything." He played the opening chords again, and this time he sang the words clearly, directly to her. "It's so relieving to know that you're leaving as soon as you get paid." Courtney's face went pale. She understood immediately that Kurt knew, that he'd seen something, heard something, figured something out. But more than that, she understood that he'd processed it, accepted it, and moved beyond it while she was still trying to figure out how to manage the situation. "The song is beautiful," she said, her voice small. "Thank you." "Kurt, whatever you think you know, I know you're leaving," he said simply. "Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but you're leaving. And that's okay. The song isn't angry about it, it's just acknowledging it." Kurt played the chorus again. "I miss the comfort in being sad." Courtney started to cry. Not the dramatic, performative tears she sometimes used to navigate difficult conversations, but quiet, genuine tears of recognition and loss. "I love you," she said. "I know you do," Kurt replied. "The song knows that too. But love isn't always enough to make people stay." He continued playing, letting the music fill the space between them. Courtney listened to the complete song, hearing her own story reflected in Kurt's words, but also hearing something larger. This wasn't just about their relationship. It was about Kurt's relationship with sadness itself, with the way he'd learned to find identity in emotional chaos. When the song ended, Courtney was still crying. "Will you record it properly?" she asked. "Probably not," Kurt said. "It's too personal, too honest. The world doesn't need to hear this one." But Kurt was wrong about that. The song was too important to remain hidden. Over the following months, as his marriage continued its inevitable dissolution, Kurt found himself returning to "You Know You're Right" again and again. It became his private anthem, his way of processing not just the end of his relationship with Courtney, but his own complicated relationship with emotional pain. In January 1994, Kurt recorded a more complete version of the song during what would be Nirvana's final studio session. Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic had no idea what they were playing, no context for the lyrics or the emotional weight Kurt was carrying. They just knew it was one of the most powerful songs Kurt had ever written. Kurt died in April 1994, 3 months after recording "You Know You're Right." The song remained unreleased for 8 years, becoming the subject of legal battles and music industry speculation. When it finally appeared on a Nirvana compilation in 2002, critics called it one of Kurt's finest compositions, a perfect summary of his artistic vision and emotional complexity. Courtney Love, by then remarried and living in Los Angeles, heard the final recording on the radio while driving down Sunset Boulevard. She had to pull over and sit in her car for 20 minutes, remembering that March night in 1993 when Kurt had played the song for her in his home studio. In interviews afterward, she would say that "You Know You're Right" was the moment she realized what she was losing, not just in Kurt, but in herself. The song had shown her a version of love that was honest enough to let go, mature enough to find peace in endings. "Kurt never yelled at me about what he saw," she told Rolling Stone in 2003. "He never confronted me, never made scenes, never tried to punish me. He just wrote a song that was more devastating than any argument could have been. It was the most Kurt thing he could have done. He turned his pain into something beautiful and true, and somehow that made it impossible to deny what was happening between us." The song Kurt wrote at 4 a.m. after discovering Courtney's betrayal became his final statement on love, loss, and the strange comfort that can be found in accepting painful truths. It was written in one night in the dark, with just an acoustic guitar and a broken heart, but it captured something essential about the human capacity to transform devastation into art. Kurt found Courtney cheating on a Thursday night in March 1993. By Friday morning, he had written one of the most honest songs of his career. The betrayal that should have destroyed him became instead the source of his most mature artistic achievement. And Courtney, listening to her husband process her infidelity through music instead of rage, finally understood what she was losing. Not just a marriage, but a partner whose response to pain was to create something lasting and true. The song became Kurt's final gift to himself, and inadvertently his final gift to her. A demonstration that love, even dying love, could still choose grace over vengeance, art over anger, understanding over destruction. That night, Kurt had discovered he was losing his wife. By morning, he had discovered something else. He was still capable of turning loss into music, pain into truth, ending into beginning. "You Know You're Right" was the sound of a man learning to let go without letting go of himself. And somehow, in that 4 a.m. moment of creation, Kurt found something he hadn't expected to find. Not happiness, not closure, but something more valuable. The realization that he could survive this too, could transform it into something meaningful, could remain himself even as everything else fell apart. The comfort in being sad, it turned out, was also the comfort in being alive. Years later, music historians would debate the significance of "You Know You're Right" in Kurt's catalog. Some saw it as his most mature work, a sign of artistic growth that his death cut tragically short. Others viewed it as a glimpse into the private emotional world that Kurt rarely revealed so directly. Dave Grohl, reflecting on the recording session in later interviews, said he could feel something different in Kurt's energy that day. "He was focused in a way I hadn't seen before," Grohl recalled, "like he was saying goodbye to something, but peacefully. There was no anger in him, just this quiet determination to get the song exactly right." Chris Novoselic remembered Kurt being unusually specific about the arrangement, taking time to explain exactly how each part should feel. Kurt wasn't usually that detailed about emotions in the studio, Novoselic said. He'd show us the parts, we'd play them, and that was it. But with this song, he wanted us to understand the story behind it, even though he never told us what the story actually was. The recording engineer that day noted that Kurt sang the vocals in just 2 takes, which was unusual for him. He usually labored over vocals, doing take after take until he got exactly what he wanted, the engineer recalled. But this one came out fully formed, like he'd been practicing it for months. Frances Bean Cobain, Kurt's daughter, would later say that "You Know You're Right" helped her understand her father as a person, not just as the myth that grew around his memory. That song shows someone who could face terrible pain and turn it into something beautiful instead of destructive, she said. It gives me hope that I inherited some of that ability. The song's title proved prophetic in ways Kurt couldn't have imagined when he wrote it. You Know You're Right became not just a statement about his marriage, but about his entire approach to emotional truth. Even in his final months, Kurt remained committed to honesty over comfort, reality over illusion. Music therapists have since used You Know You're Right as an example of how creativity can process trauma in healthy ways. The song demonstrates what they call emotional alchemy, the transformation of pain into something that serves healing rather than perpetuating damage. That March night in 1993, when Kurt found Courtney with another man, could have been the beginning of the end. Instead, it became the moment when Kurt discovered his capacity for grace under pressure, his ability to respond to betrayal with art instead of vengeance. The song he wrote in those dark hours before dawn remains one of the most powerful examples of how great artists transform their worst moments into their best work. Kurt's pain became everyone's healing. His private devastation became public art that would comfort others facing similar losses. And somewhere in that transformation, Kurt found something he'd been searching for his entire career: proof that he could survive anything, as long as he could still make music about it. The comfort in being sad, it turned out, was also the comfort in being alive, being creative, being human in all its messy, beautiful, heartbreaking complexity. That 4 a.m. song became Kurt's masterpiece of emotional honesty.